One of the most common questions that we're asked by new homeowners is how to take care of their yard in the first year. We pick all of our landscaping and vegetation based off of things that are going to be low maintenance and very easy for our customers to take care of. The top priority when taking care of your landscaping is watering consistently. We set up all of our sprinkler systems to water once every other day for 8 to 12 minutes a zone, depending on the size of the zone and also how hot it is outside. It's best to adjust your sprinkler system in small increments. Walk it up by 2 minutes a zone, walk it down by 2 minutes a zone. Really just pay attention to your yard. If it looks green, if it looks full, you're watering plenty, and maybe you can even afford to conserve some water on your yard. If it's starting to look dry, crispy, start to look yellow, that's the time where you want to start walking up your settings slowly, 1 to 2 minutes at a time. Whenever you're adjusting your sprinkler system and figuring out how much water you want to put down in terms of increasing your settings or lowering your settings, one very good indicator that it's time to lower your settings is if your yard is heavily saturated several hours after you've run your sprinkler system. If you're walking around and your yard seems squishy, it seems like you're getting a lot of mud overlapping your shoes, that is a direct indicator that you need to tone down your sprinkler settings. Watering should be very easy in the winter as well. If we have days like we do in Oklahoma where it's going to be above 40 degrees all day and not drop below freezing, it's best to water on those days as well whenever you can. Winterization is very simple. All you do is winterize the system if we're getting to below freezing temperatures, and other than that, you really want your sprinkler system to be on and running again anytime whenever it's above 40 degrees outside. Fertilizing is something that we highly recommend in the first year. Any fertilizer that has a high nitrogen ratio is going to be very good for Bermuda sod. Bermuda sod is what we use on every house for 2 primary reasons. Number 1, it's extremely energy efficient. As the most energy efficient builder in Oklahoma, we want to put a grass down that our homeowners aren't going to have to spend a lot of money on water in order to take care of. Secondly, it's extremely resilient. We can install Bermuda in the winter, all year long, and we always know that it's going to come through and survive. So it's extremely low maintenance. The one caution that we do have in the first year is any weed treatment. If you do want to apply weed treatment in the first year, we highly recommend contacting a landscaping professional for that so that you make sure that you use the right product that's not going to damage your yard. I'm now going to show you how to winterize your sprinkler system, which the way we set up our systems, it's extremely easy to do. On your panel right here, you have this dial. Generally speaking, your system is going to be in the auto setting. If it's in auto, that means that it's going to be running in the schedule that you have set up. So currently at the house that we're in right now, it says our next start time is going to be 4 a.m. on Tuesday. So that means that the system is on. For the panel, in order to winterize it, all you have to do is use this dial to scroll down to off and hit the middle button. If it says off right there, that means that as far as the panel is concerned, you've done what you need to do in order to winterize your system. After that, there's just one valve in your water heater closet that we need to switch off, and then you're all winterized. For our sprinkler manifolds in the water heater closet, they're all set up the same way. They all look relatively the same. However, some of them are different sizes. They're hung at different heights. So if your house doesn't look exactly like this, no reason to be concerned. It just should look like 3 valves on a 90-degree angled pipe. So you have your vacuum breaker, you have your 3 valves. The one on the bottom is the only one you should concern yourself with. And a little quarter turn to perpendicular is going to cut it off. As it pertains to any shutoff valve inside your home, if the valve is going with the same direction of the pipe, it's going to be open. Flipping it perpendicular will close it. So at this house, the sprinkler system is now fully winterized. Let's go over how to set up your sprinkler system. First off, all of our yards are set up mostly the same way as far as your zones go. So zone 1 is always your flower bed, that's where it starts, and then it goes zone 2 in the front yard, and it wraps itself in a U shape until the very last zone is always going to run along the exterior wall of your garage. Your sprinkler system puts down roughly 10 to 15 gallons per minute, depending on the size of the zone. Your flower bed and your side yards, those are your smaller zones, they'll probably put closer to that 10 gallons per minute number, whereas your open yard areas, your front yard and your backyard, they will have a higher output. That's very important to keep in mind whenever you're adjusting your sprinkler settings, because if you increase your zone run times by 1 to 2 minutes per zone, you're effectively adding 20 to 30 gallons of water on that zone every other day throughout your watering schedule. Whenever we're setting up a sprinkler system, essentially what we're doing is putting it on a schedule. So the first thing that we always want to do is check the date and time and make sure that it is correct. 2022, August, and this actually says it's the 8th. We're August 9th right now, so we're going to change that. It says 6:11 a.m. It is currently 8:46 a.m., so this is why we always check to make sure the date and time are correct. This will make sure that your sprinkler system waters at the correct date and time that you want it to. Now date and time is set. So the first thing we're going to do is look at how often down here. That's the first thing we want to start with. We do water rationing in Oklahoma, meaning you want to water every other day at most. We do this based off of what the last number of your address is. So if your address is 18512, your house ends in an even number, you're going to water on even dates. So over here to the far right, there's a selection, odd or even. We're going to select even. That is one thing that you'll really never want to change unless you want to water less and you want to water every 3 or 4 days at an interval, something like that. But this is what we recommend and what we set up every house to water at. We're going to hit the back button. Now we're going to go to start times. So with our yards, we want to set them up to where you don't have to water too much. So you only need one start time. It's always good to check and scroll through because you can have up to 4 start times. You want to make sure that only one is implemented, and it's set at 4 a.m. We're going to go ahead and keep that. It's best to water whenever it's still dark outside. That way the sun doesn't evaporate that water before your yard has a chance to absorb it. So one start time at 4 a.m., that's exactly what we recommend. We do not recommend adding a second start time because instead of watering once every other day, you're going to water twice every other day. That will effectively double the amount of water that you're putting down. If you feel that you need to water more, always go to the zone run times. Adding a second start time is an overcorrection. Now we're going to go to zone run times. So let's see how many zones this yard has. This yard has 7 zones. If you scroll to the end and you notice that you have a zone that says 0 minutes, that's just an empty placeholder zone. It's not actually something that you need to be turning water onto your yard. So this, while it says it has 8 stations, this yard has 7 zones. So what we recommend is 8 to 12 minutes per zone, depending on the size and how hot it is and so on. So we're going to set up zone 1, the flower bed. We usually set that up right at 10 minutes. Zone 2 is the front yard. That's an open yard area. It's larger. So we want to keep that a little bit higher at 12 minutes, especially considering the heat that we've been in this year. Zone 3, generally speaking, depending on the zones that you have, it's really beneficial to run your sprinklers and see where your zones are at. Usually zone 3 is going to be a side yard, which is much more narrow. Your neighbors may also have sprinklers, so you really don't have to water nearly as much on zone 3 or your side yards in general. So we're going to keep that one at 8 minutes. Now here we have 4, 5, and 6. Those are all going to be the backyard. At this house, the backyard is split into thirds. So same as the front yard, we're going to put all those on 12 minutes. And then lastly, zone 7 here, that's going to be the last zone on the exterior wall of the garage, the other side yard. We're going to go ahead and put that at 8 minutes as well. So now the system is fully set up as far as your settings. In order to engage the settings fully that you just implemented, just hit auto. And now it says next start time 4 a.m. on Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be an even day since we set that up. That is all you should have set up as a Taber homeowner. If you want to adjust your settings, all we recommend doing is going down here to your zone run times and making small adjustments, 1 to 2 minutes at a time if you want to increase your watering, 1 to 2 minutes lowering if you want to conserve water. It's best to walk it up and walk it down. There's no urgent circumstance where you need to drown your yard in order to save it. Bermuda is extremely resilient and you do have time to adjust these settings and play with it and see where you want it to be. The last thing we want to mention is the wireless capabilities of your sprinkler panel. Once you move in and get your Wi-Fi set up, you do have the ability to connect to your panel with your smartphone. This allows you to control your settings through your phone, track your watering usage, as well as implement a rain and freeze delay. Once you have your phone connected to the panel through the app, the panel will automatically communicate with local weather stations and will emit a rain delay or a freeze delay if we're getting rain or it's going to drop below freezing. This completely renders the rain sensors and freeze sensors that used to be an upgrade for sprinkler systems as an add-on obsolete. The one thing we will caution against when using the app to control your sprinkler system is the smart watering settings that it'll promote. In our experience, smart watering settings will generally have our customers putting down much more water than they need to on their yard. So we recommend sticking with the settings that we've set up for you and that we recommend. Let's talk about the soil type underneath your yard. In Oklahoma City, all new developments are being pushed further around the outside of the city, and almost all of these developments are built on red dirt clay type soil. This type of soil has an extremely high contraction rate and causes the yard to settle at different rates in different areas. So whenever it's introduced to sprinklers, whenever it's introduced to rain, different parts of the yard may settle faster than others. So if you see this, just let the yard continue to do what it's going to do. The settling will occur at the fastest rate in the first year alone. This red dirt clay type soil has very limited absorbency. So almost all of your absorbency comes in the health of the sod. So very important to keep in mind that you want to take care of your yard, because whenever we get heavier rainfalls, if we go through a hotter time of the year, we need to water more. All of your absorbency is coming from the sod and not the soil type. One common question that we're asked in relativity to the yards pertains to lumpiness and unevenness in the yard. The reason for this is because the yard is new and it's experiencing settling for the first time. With the red dirt clay type soil that we have, different areas of the yard will settle at different rates. In order to combat this, we make sure the final grade is smooth, and whenever sod goes down, we have our landscaping and erosion company roll each yard to make sure it's as smooth as possible. But once you move in and continue to water the yard, once we have heavier rainfalls, different areas of the yard will settle at different rates. What we recommend is letting the yard progress and do what it's going to do naturally throughout the first year. And then after the first year, identify any low spots that you want to top dress. Many of our customers will take it upon themselves to top dress the yards within the first year, and it's certainly an option that you have. However, we do recommend waiting for the yard to do what it's going to do naturally over the first year, just to mitigate some of the work that you may be doing yourself, as much of your yard will improve marginally on its own. One good indicator if you have a concern about the way your yard looks is to walk your neighborhood. Look at the yards that have been established for a year or more. Most of the time they're going to be relatively even, and you can pretty much be confident that the homeowners did not take any corrective action themselves on the yard. They did not do any additional rolling. They did not do any additional top dressing. That is what the yard is going to look like as it progresses naturally throughout the first 1 to 2 years. Regarding the health of your sod, we use Bermuda sod on every house that we build. Bermuda is extremely resilient and also low maintenance. What it needs even more than water is going to be sunlight. So in the first year, especially if you install a fence, it's going to be best to identify areas of your yard that don't receive a whole lot of sunlight throughout the day and aren't going to grow in as thick. If you identify those areas and want to get some sod growing on those bare spots, the best thing to do is place some fescue seeds down. Fescue is a type of grass that actually responds to shade in cooler climates better than a lot of sunlight. So that's going to bridge the gap on those areas that are bare, because the Bermuda is not getting the sunlight that it needs. In a newer yard, one of the easier ways to tell if your yard is fully established is, can you still see the lines in the sod after it was installed? And if you bend down and you tug on the grass, is it adhered to the ground, or can you lift up those strips of sod? If you can still see the lines, if you can lift up the strips of sod, that's an indicator that your yard is not yet established, and it's best to go ahead and make sure you have your watering settings at the optimal settings. Another thing that you can do to progress the development of your sod is put down some nitrogen fertilizer. Any fertilizer should work, but nitrogen high ratios are what Bermuda responds to the best. One of the most common requests that we receive is if we can provide a diagram showing where the sprinkler system is located as far as the lines and the sprinkler heads. Because every lot is different, and because each sprinkler system is tailored to the lot that it's installed on, we're not able to provide an exact diagram showing where those lines are located. But if you look at where your heads are whenever they're running, if you look at where your green valve boxes are located in the yard, it's very easy to identify where your sprinkler system is located, because everything runs in vertical and horizontal lines, and they're connected at right angles. So if you can look at where your sprinkler system is located, where your heads are coming up, where your valve boxes are, you can sort of put together in your mind this grid, which is where your system is installed. talk about the drainage of your yard. Every yard is graded to where it should slope away from the house and take water away from your home, and most importantly, the foundation. Between these two houses, you can see that the yard is sloped away from both houses, and it meets in the middle, what we call a swell, and the water will travel away from the properties from there. The number one goal in setting up the drainage on a yard is protecting your foundation from having standing water next to it. The way that we gauge a yard's performance on drainage is how it performs after rainfall. If you're noticing that your yard is heavily saturated or you have standing water, but there hasn't been any rainfall, you've only been running your sprinklers, that's an indicator that you need to check your watering settings and make sure that you're not overwatering. Drainage is pretty easy. Water runs downhill. One of the most common questions that we get is, should we install a drain? When is a drain needed? Primarily, we try not to install drains because those end up being homeowner maintenance items for our customers down the road whenever they get clogged and need to be cleaned out. Our goal as your builder is to grade your yard and make sure the slopes are 100% consistent to where water travels away from the home site on its own without any maintenance on your part. One of the biggest things to factor in whenever it comes to drainage is the yard itself, the health of the sod itself. It is not super common for the yard in itself to be completely free of low spots, to be completely perfect on the slope. But where there might be some minor puddles here or there, that's whenever your yard's absorbency comes in, and it'll make it to where you do not have standing water 24 hours after a nominal rainfall or 48 hours after a heavier rainfall. Those are the parameters by which we gauge a yard's performance on drainage and see if a correction or improvement is needed. Erosion is something that we're also asked about sometimes. Erosion most commonly occurs around fence posts, around retaining walls, and then also around some of the flatwork concrete, perhaps your air conditioning pad, your driveway, a sidewalk. Any civil engineer will tell you that the best defense against erosion is established sod. A lot of times erosion will occur around fence posts because perhaps the established sod is disturbed whenever fencing contractors are setting their posts and sod is not placed back over it in time. Erosion is always caused by traveling water. So whenever we get heavy rainfall, that is what exacerbates the effects of erosion. The best defense is established sod. If you notice erosion around any of these components, the best thing to do is to go purchase some sod, put it over the area that's eroding, and also use sod staples to help adhere it to the ground. That will ensure that the sod has a chance to take and root into the ground and adhere properly before another heavy rain washes it away and you have to do it all over again.